Hello everybody, good morning. So today we're talking about managing billing using our heavy job pay estimate. This webinar will get you comfortable with navigating through the pay estimate system and all the setup screens you need to make it work. So I'm going to walk through the process of setting up the pay schedule, setting up your pay items, and also designating which cost codes are going to be drivers for those pay items. By the time we're finished today, you'll be able to run through the pay item profit report and to determine your estimated profitability for your pay items before you even start a pay cycle. So we'll be having the second installment of the pay estimate webinar, and it's going to fall on a later date. We're going to cover, in that one, we'll have the pay estimate summary, how to start your first pay period, and then understanding all the fields that you see in that summary detail to help you more efficiently create a bill for your owner. So at this point, I'm going to send out a quick poll for you guys. I just kind of want to get a feel for how many of you guys are already using the pay estimate system. I'm going to give you guys about 10 more seconds here to answer that poll before we get rolling. All right, so here you see our agenda we have up in front of us. First, we're going to talk about what is pay estimate. How's your company going to use it in order for you to help track payments and for invoicing as well. Next, then we're going to move through to setting up the actual pay estimate, which is where you're going to create the pay periods and also set up your pay items. And that is if they hadn't already came in from HeavyBid for you. And then we're going to talk about assigning the cost code drivers to track the completion. So creating the relationships between the cost codes and their pay items, and then making a factor to decide what the driving ratio of each one of those cost codes is going to be. The last part I was talking about is this pay item profit report. This report's unique because after you do today's setup, you'll be able to estimate your profitability per pay item just from beginning the setup and pay estimate. All right, so we do have help topics that are available for pay estimate feature in Heavy Job, and these are on our help.hcss.com website. I'd like to take a moment to show everyone the site and how to do a quick search before we get started. So see, I brought the site up here, and we type pay estimate into the search up top. And as soon as I hit enter, it's going to bring up all the topics that we have for pay estimate listed here. And if I wanted to here, you can click on any one of these and get a quick article to help you out. And then back there on the screen we were just on, if you look on the right-hand side, you can actually click on the word Heavy Job, and it'll filter your results to only Heavy Job-related articles. All right, I'm going to send out one more poll for you guys now. I'm just going to get a feel for who's already using our help system and where you guys lie as far as having experienced it. Should be coming across to you now. I'm going to give you guys about 10 more seconds to finish up that poll. All right, we'll go ahead and close out that poll. All right, so first off, let's talk about why even use the pay estimate feature in Heavy Job. What benefit does it have for you guys as customers? So I'd like to explain the purpose behind it. You might ask, how's this feature going to benefit my company? Well, there's many reasons, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to efficiency and tracking completion of your pay items and then invoicing it correctly. One of the reasons is some owners accept this form of the pay estimate as an invoice itself. Also, it's a great communication tool for a project team, so if someone's out for the day, another person can pick that information up on the screen and basically continue working from where you left off completely unhindered. And also, it's a really efficient way to provide billing information to accounting team members as well. So we're going to start with how to actually set up the pay estimate module. So let's head over here into Heavy Job. We're going to open up the Pay Estimate tab at the very top. And we're going to click on Pay Estimate Setup. All right, so Pay Estimate is going to allow you to more efficiently track that completion of your pay items and also allow for easy scheduled invoicing to the owner based on verified completed production. So the Pay Estimate feature in Heavy Job, it heavily relies on production quantities being logged and submitted to the manager system. If you're not logging production quantities and time cards, getting that into the system, there's not a whole lot that Pay Estimate is going to be able to provide for you. So we're going to click on that first tab, Periods, here. And once you set up your first Pay Estimate, you'll have that contract ID. It's commonly just the job number. This is just a text field where you can enter whatever you like here. You also have the name of the job, depending on the description, you can enter in here. And just below that, you'll see the Pay Estimate description fields for contract ID and description. It'll automatically bring in your original contract amount from HeavyBid according to the unit prices you sent over. The original contract amount is the sum of all the pay items you have for a particular job. We've got the stored material field here. Stored material is another field that you have to set up. First, you got to consider whether or not you're allowed to be paid for stored material as per your contract. And this is typically determined by how that contract's set up, and the value is going to be specified there for you. So if you just enter that percentage here, that'll get us set up. In the second part of the webinar for Pay Estimate, I'm going to cover how you can specify a stored material amount for each pay item, rather than this overarching percentage that we're looking at right now to be applied per period. There's also an option to provide a lump sum amount, and once the material is received and installed, it's to be removed from the total of the stored materials on hand. Next up is the method for request amount, and you'll see this right here to the right. It's got kind of a radio button. You can select either one of the two. The method for request amount determines whether you bill the owner for all the completed work, which includes previously unpaid balances that have already been sent out to that owner, or simply just for this period's invoice. So a good example of this would be, like, for instance, if the first billing period you billed for was $1,000 and you haven't received a payment before the second billing cycle completes, that second billing cycle includes, let's say, $1,500 invoice. So here's your decision. Am I going to bill for only the current period's total, and that would be the subtract previously requested method, or do I bill for the full $2,500 unpaid balance, which would be the subtract previously paid method? So in the event that you're actually lucky enough to have an owner that's paying invoices soon, like right after they receive them, you could use the subtract previously paid option in that case, and just log your payments in our pay estimate summary, and then you'll have Heavy Job calculate the current amount due. However, all too often the owners are not so quick to pay, and the previously requested method becomes the better option, especially when it's likely that I'm going to complete multiple billing cycles before that owner gets around to having any of those payments roll in for me. So changing this option here in this screen, it'll change whether our pay estimate summary is going to subtract previously requested or previously paid amounts, and you can see the verbiage change on that screen as well to let you know what kind of math it's doing. Next up, let's talk about the Pay Estimate Info tab. So that's one tab over from where we're at right now. And here you'll see the owner information on the left. This is the detailed information regarding the owner. So if we take the time to set this up here, it'll save us time later because it'll automatically populate this information for us in our summary each time for every single one of the billing periods. And it doesn't require us to type all this info in each time. And it's likely that we're going to have the same owner throughout this job. The same thing applies here on the right-hand side for the contractor field. If you set it up here, it's going to be populated for all of your pay periods in the summary. An even better idea for this field is to set it up with information on your screen so it goes into your master. If you set your contractor information up in your master, any of the jobs that you create off of this master will inherit that information downwards. And then here on the right, we've got the retainage tab. Let's talk about that for just a second. So the last part of the Pay Estimate Info setup is the retainage tab. And here we got multiple ways of addressing retainage. Sometimes some states have no retainage, whereas some states will have multiple levels of it. This is just something that's commonly specified in your contract, and you can apply it here. So essentially, you state a percentage that's going to be withheld until you reach a certain dollar amount, basically a threshold, at which point you can set a new percentage that will require a new threshold amount to be completed. So if it's the case that your job is going to remain at 5% retainage the whole way through, I could put a 5% in this field and then just type in a bunch of 9s. So why would I do that? Obviously, it's not because I have any intention of reaching that value. I mean, this isn't going to affect how much it's going to be taken as retainage. It basically just states what the limit is for a figure so large that it's going to encompass all my work. So I know that my contract amount's not anywhere near that big. So I'll never approach that. And that way, the 5% rule will be in effect throughout. There's also a method by which retainage can be calculated per pay item, much like we were talking about for stored material. And we're going to discuss that in the second pay estimate webinar as well. So also on the screen, you'll see there's checkboxes that allow you to set whether or not you want stored material and pending change order amounts to also have retainage applied to them. It's not very often that you'll be able to bill the owner for pending change orders. All right, I'm going to pause here for just a second in case you guys have any questions regarding the setup screen.
We do have a question. Mark asked, if owner and contractor info was set up in heavy bid, will it carry over into heavy job? And we don't seem to have a concise answer on that. Mark, I'll get with you on that later. We're going to research it during the meantime, and I'll make sure to get you an answer. That was the only question.
Okay. The next step is actually the creation of the pay periods themselves. So we're going to head back to that periods tab and delve into it a little bit more. So in this pay period tab, you'll see it's the amount of time one of your cycles of payment takes to complete. So each pay period's ending will be another bill to the owner as produced. The periods tab is where you specify the schedule for your billing, and you can decide how many periods you need until the job's complete. Also how often they occur and when they begin and end. So this screen has an automation feature that allows for cycles to be created on a schedule for X amount of times. That's the define pay periods button down here in the bottom left. In this screen, you can set up a recurrence pattern for which you want a pay period to begin, how long the date range is going to extend, creating pay periods. You can select which day of the week the pay period will be created on, and also how often you'd like the cycles to be created. In some jobs with more convoluted pay schedules, you may have to do some sort of manual entry in this periods tab. This works a lot like setting up a recurring meeting in Outlook. So we're going to do a random sequence of recurrence, a day of the week, and a month here, and create some pay periods so you guys can see how it automatically created those for me. And they're all up on the screen here now. I've got 12 of them. Let's say I wanted to create one more pay period that didn't necessarily follow that same logic that they were starting once a month here. I can hand create one as well on this screen, and just manually select any work begin and end dates, custom dates for the pay estimate to occur. Again, this is the case if your pay cycles are unpredictable or show less of a pattern than something you could set up with that define pay periods option. All right, and now that we got all these set up, if we ever wanted to get rid of all these out of here and just completely clear the screen, over in the bottom right, there's a clear pay periods option. So we're not actually going to click that, but if you do, it pops up and makes sure that this is what you want to do before you actually do it. So this will clear out any pay periods that haven't already been finalized. All right, so let's get to setting up the pay items. So that's actually under the pay estimate tab again. And we're going to go to pay item. And this is our pay item setup here. So there's actually a number of ways to set these up for the pay estimate system. They can be sent in automatically from heavy bid and come across to heavy job. That's simply by selecting yes on your export pay items option on that heavy bid export you guys have probably seen before. Typically, each bid item in heavy bid becomes a pay item for tracking in heavy job. Also, you can import these pay items from an Excel spreadsheet if you have them, using just our regular old Excel import feature. And also, you can create them manually in the pay estimate pay item setup screen that we're looking at here. You can just type them in. So let's take a look at that basic tab here. We can see each of the pay items which are set up in the system with their contract quantities and their unit prices, and the amount column shows these two numbers multiplied out. We have a status column which shows any pay items which have begun production or are already completed or set to discontinued. And any pay items that are set to discontinued won't be included in this pay period's estimate summary. Next, let's look at the quantities tab. If we switch over here, we can see this screen would most likely be helpful for a job that's got a change order and are using HeavyJob's change tracking system. So all the fields you see here on the screen, they can be viewed somewhere else in the system except for the change order quantity and the revised quantity. If you do have change orders in the pay estimate system, this is actually a great way to compare the original contract amounts to the change order amounts and then see how they're affecting your total. On the screen where you see the contract quantity, this refers to the original quantity that does not include any changes. So like I said, again, this tab is most helpful for change tracking type of jobs. Also, we have the Other tab. This tab here, it's got an option for you to add what's called a summary code to your pay items. If I choose to give 2 or 3 of these items in the summary code of, let's say, earthwork, in my reporting, I can select the summary sort option and then have totals provided to me for each summary category I create. So it's an efficient way to track pay items by their group or by their phase. So see here, I typed in earthwork on a couple of these items. If I was to run a report and choose summary sort, it's going to group all of those earthwork and, like for instance, these pipe items together and give me totals on them. Another thing we've got here in this screen is the Stop Overruns checkbox. Whereas selecting this option is not going to keep my foreman in the field from entering more production quantities than were budgeted. It's also not going to keep my manager system from importing those transactions. It doesn't block the cost is what I'm saying. It can continue to accrue. But what it does do is keeps me from overbilling the owner for these pay items regardless of the production that was logged. And then you have here on the right, there's a note field where any notes regarding this pay item can be entered and also seen in reporting. All right, so let's take a look at the single entry tab right here to the right of Other. And this tab is unique for one simple fact. It's the only screen in HeavyJob that can show you in a really quick and easy way what cost code drivers you have set for each of your pay items. So cost code drivers determine which ones of your cost codes are going to be used as like a leading indicator for when a pay item is going to be completed. We'll get more to that in just a second. The pay estimate tab of the cost code setup tab can be difficult to see all the drivers for a pay item. The drivers checkboxes are on the opposite side of the screen from pay item codes. So in this screen we're looking at here, I can quickly choose the pay item up above, and then all of the cost code drivers for that item will be listed below. Above are the fields that have been populated from each of the other tabs, and then they can show a rundown of each pay item setups fields in a glance. So now let's actually take a look at how to set up those drivers we were talking about in our pay estimate summary. And I'll pause here for just a second in case anybody has a question.
We don't have any new questions, but we were able to answer to get an answer from Mark. Adam, you want to get in there real quick?
If the owner is set up in HeavyBid, it does come over into HeavyJob automatically as part of the export. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a contractor field in HeavyBid that would flow into HeavyJob, so it would not come over.
Those are all the questions we have.
All right. So now we're going to navigate over to set up cost codes. And you've probably seen this screen once or twice before, but we're going to look at the pay estimate tab. It's almost to the right, all the way there. Here is where we assign what cost codes are going to drive which pay items. Some of these cost codes may not have any driving pay items to connect to at all. All your indirects, for example, will not have their own pay items, and they'll have their own separate line down below. So any cost codes that allow you to claim for payment from the owner should be checked off. Some of these are actually going to drive revenue, and others are incidental. So up here up top, you see item cost code 10 and 10.1. Your mobilization here, you've got a lump sum here. We have 2 of them with subs and equipment, and we have percentages in the factor column that we're able to see how much we want each to go towards pushing that mobilization. So this doesn't mean that's what you have to bill. It just represents what you're telling the system you're justified to bill for our project manager's perspective. The factor represents the weight by which a cost code will drive the completion of that pay item. So let's talk about setting those factors up for each one of these cost code drivers. So we're going to right-click in the factors column here, and it's going to bring up a pop-up menu. And you'll see there's a button available here. It says Calculate Driving Factors by Budgeted Cost. So if I click on that here, it gives me the total dollars for each cost code and gives you the percentages that each carry towards the whole based on their budgeted cost. Here you'll see each cost code, which has been checked as a driver for a pay item, and each of the cost codes designated as a driver is going to contribute a percentage towards the whole, and then allow that factor for each to be created to determine, the pull of each cost code towards the completion.
No question. We have a quick question from Jim Eckroat. Are the drivers based on production or installed quantities? So basically, the cost code drivers are going to drive the production quantities of installed quantities on a cost code toward the pay item. Now, if you have installed quantities on a material, those can push through into the cost code and then through into the pay item. And there's a special way of doing it that we're going to cover in a little bit.
All right. Not all the cost codes here are assigned to a pay item will be a driver. So it's really only the cost codes that play a role in like the trackable and verifiable completion of that pay item. So most commonly, this is just the most apparent indicator of pay item's completion. If you're laying pipe down as a pay item, it would be common for the actual placement of the pipe or the backfill cost codes to be drivers for that item. So let's right-click in the factors column once again and get that pop-up menu to come back. This time, upon initial setup, you see the factors unmodified, and they're all set to 1.0 here. But when we right-click in this column, you see an option to auto-select the cost codes as drive. So what that does, when the system can see that you have a one-to-one relationship where there's only one cost code for a pay item, and you select this option, it's going to auto-set that cost code to a driver for each one of these cases, and it automatically factors it for you as well. It works on the presumption that because there's only one cost code assigned to the pay item, it's going to be the determination of progress for that pay item itself. The purpose, all in all, of factors is to allow you to set a ratio to account for your production quantity versus your revenue quantity. The factor shows how your cost code quantity relates to your pay item quantity. For example, if I have a pay item like flared ends, and they've been bid as one lump sum, but I know the work's going to take 3 flared ends in that project to construct, each time I install one, it'll give me as a factor of 0.33 of that lump sum. So the cost code quantity differs from the pay item quantity, which it was bid at. I'm going to use that factor to form that relationship by which Heavy Job is going to determine its completion. So let's take a look at the Advanced Types tab. So once we've assigned this, we want to go in to the Advanced Types, and here we can designate where our subcontractor quantities will come from. So we're going to scroll down here to a striping cost code. Should be 210. There we go. And here we have a cost code where a striper is going to be doing some work for us. When we send this information over from HeavyBid, it's already going to have that relationship set up here. But if it's created after the fact, we actually have to create the advanced budget ourselves that's going to tie that sub in to that cost code and decide who it is exactly that's going to push that quantity, and we'll look at that next. Advanced budgets are just relationships between the cost codes and their materials and subs. So I think this hits back on Jim's question a moment ago. If we set this logic up here, once you place an installed quantity, that's actually going to help you drive that. The next piece of setting this up, though, is we're going to select a 4 subcode here that's assigned as a material sub from a cost code, and then click into that column. What this does is it tells Heavy Job that this sub is going to push that quantity for that pay item. Same thing can go for a material. So we can now enter our production quantities for our work, and the system will calculate those values out for us. The sub assignment setup we just completed will give us the production quantity for our cost analysis, and the next step is how we tie this into our pay estimate. So we're going to head over to the Advanced Budgets tab. Actually, set up Advanced Budgets. There you go. And we're going to navigate down to the Advanced Budgets setup here and add in a few columns from the custom settings. So that button's down in the bottom right. And you have to be on the Customize tab for that to pop up for you. We want to add in Factor, Pay Item, and Drive. So these are the same fields we were just looking at in the cost code setup under that Pay Estimate tab. However, this time we're assigning the drivers for our subcontractor Advanced Budgets. This is going to allow us to assign the driver for the striping cost code we just set up and to pull production from our 4-stripe subcode. So we'll select that off as a driver here. So we've navigated down to the cost code with that striping sub and are now going to select this Advanced Budget as a driver. And now that we have that set up, it's going to allow production quantities to be pulled from the time card for tracking completion, and now the MSE entries that bring over values into the pay estimate. So once all these connections have been made, that's all the driving information we need to set up, defining relationships between cost codes and their pay items. Last year I want to talk about the pay item profit report, and this is going to aid in estimating profitability for each of your items. After we run the estimate, finalize the quantities, submit the billing to accounting, now you can report on profitability. So once we have all this complete, there's a report in Heavy Job called the Pay Item Profit Report that you can see regardless of the pay estimate cycles. Did we make money today or not? This report doesn't calculate in regards to budgets and cost code setup. It reports in relation to payment on a scheduled basis. So this report's really unrefined look at profit. It's going to take the cost for each one of those pay items, compare it to what it thinks your revenue should be based on the drivers and factors we just set up, and give you what it estimates your profit to be per item. And on that last page, it gives you estimated profit for this job altogether. So some users who don't even use pay estimate feature to track completion will at least set up their pay items and cost code drivers and factors like we just did to view this report and see the estimated totals because it's so helpful. We're actually going to run this here for a 1-month date range back from today. So we'll run that from like 7/10 is fine. You'll see that come up here. Now those 2 cost codes were set as drivers. So you can see what your estimated profit will be here. And the more of these drivers that you have set up, you'll see this report kind of fill out. So this is basically setting up the pay estimate system. Next time we're going to cover quite a few more things, but with just these things in place, you should be able to use this report to tell you about your profitability. So today we talked about the various methods of creating our pay items and having them brought in from HeavyBid. We also talked about how to create the pay schedule and to determine our billing rates for our pay periods. We touched on how to set a cost code as a driver and then determine a valid factor by which this item is going to drive completion. And then we also discussed the pay item profit report and getting that estimation for profit. So I hope this webinar has been both informative and helpful today. I welcome everyone to attend the second installment of the pay estimate, where we're going to delve deeper, and this is going to be where we start our first pay cycle. We're going to start entering production. We're going to track completion of those pay items in the pay estimate summary. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor to any questions you may have regarding today's content. We'll do our best to address them all. If any questions remain unanswered by the end of today's webinar, HCSS will reach out to you and ensure that everyone gets answered. And then again, this webinar is going to be available on our help site to view at a later time, and that's help.hcss.com.
So Clint, we do have one question. come in so far. Is the estimated profit based on budget or actual costs?
So I can take that one if nobody else wants to. So it's going to be actual cost that's pulling from whatever's entered in on a time card, and then the revenue it's estimating based on the production quantities that you've reported, multiplied out by whatever factor you set up. So it's not going to take into account if you've had any quantities disallowed by an owner, or if you've gone back and done a survey and determined that your revenue reportable quantities are in fact different from what the factor says they should be. So it's real cost compared to an estimated revenue quantity.
And we'll get into how we can do disallowed quantities and other different quantities at next week's webinar.
Sure. And just to be clear, that answer was specific to just that pay item profit report, not to the pay estimate system in general.
I do want to chime in. Adam mentioned next week the actual webinar will be somewhere towards mid-September to end of September.
Sorry. We have another question that came in. Can we use the pay estimates to generate cost to complete? So within our cost to complete module, it actually does forecast revenue in addition to forecasting the cost to complete. It does forecast the revenue. So we're assuming your question is can we forecast the revenue side of things as well? And both cost and revenue within the forecasting module do drive off of actual quantity. So it is drive off of the productions there. If you have a more detailed question about forecasting, definitely give support a ring, and we'd be happy to walk through that with you. Can you adjust? We have another question. Can you adjust the pay estimate to the approved quantities instead of completed quantities?
Yes.
The answer to that is yes, and that will be something we'll be covering in the second half of the webinar, which is sometime in September.
Yes. All right. That seems to be it for the questions. As always, you can always email us at support@acss.com if you have any questions. You can visit our help center, help@acss.com, or you can give us a call. Other than that, thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you all at the next webinar.